"Boy, can you grab me another drink?" He said it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile that comes from someone born sure they'd never have to say please to someone like me. I had a name tag on. I had a pressed blazer, a tablet in my hand, and a badge that said "Historian in Residence" and bold and clear. But none of that mattered to the man in the tailored grey suit, holding his whiskey like a trophy and waving his glass like I was holding a tray. I didn't correct him, not yet. Just looked him dead in the face, let that moment hang in the air like a held breath. I knew what was coming, and so did he just didn't know it was going to come from me. The grand hall of the Sedgewood Cultural Centre always smelled like lemon oil and old money. Everything echoed, footsteps, laughter, the clinking of crystal against marble countertops. Even the whispers carried. Tonight was their annual Legacy Gala, a celebration of Southern history and progress. Translation: a chance for donors to parade around in gowns and tuxedos while drinking to stories they never lived and names they barely knew. They hired me to curate the new Civil Rights Wing and then promptly told guests I was helping set up, so I could have walked out the minute they gave the speech slot to some out-of-town trustee instead of me. But I'd worked too long, read too many old letters, cried over too many unnamed faces in blurred black and white photos to let them erase me again. So I stayed. Quiet. Not small. Just watching. The new exhibit I built sat behind velvet ropes, handwritten testimonies from protesters jailed in 1963, a cracked brick from the burned church in Gadsden, a faded lunch counter receipt with the word "coloured" stamped in red. I spent months piecing it together, alone, late at night, after lectures, after grading, after grief. And yet, at this party, I was invisible, until I wasn't. It started with a cough, one of those dry little chuckles rich men make when they think they've caught something clever in their throat. "You've got him dressed up nice, Diane," said the man in the navy tux to the museum director. Almost didn't recognize him. Usually they're in uniform. She laughed, tense, hollow. Didn't correct him. Didn't say I was the one who trained her new staff. Didn't say I wrote the damn exhibit brochure they all skimmed before sipping cocktails named after freedom fighters they couldn't pronounce. I was standing 3 feet away. I turned toward the portraits hung behind the buffet. 4 black women frozen in time, one of them mid-sentence, mouth open like she still had more to say. Ain't that always the way? I held my tongue too. Not because I was afraid, because I was building something. The comments came in waves, not direct, never that bold, that would have been too easy to confront. Just smiles that skimmed past me, gestures toward empty glasses, condescending nods like I should be grateful to be breathing the same air. "You here with the caterers? You security for the night? Make sure nobody touches the art, okay?" Even when I introduced myself, DeShawn Brooks, PhD candidate, archival history focus, they'd tilt their heads like I'd said something in a foreign tongue. One man blinked, then still handed me his coat. And there was the board chair, Clarence Whitlow, the one who'd fought my inclusion on the exhibit. Said my proposal was too emotional, that we needed balance, like racism had a second side worth celebrating. He stopped by the exhibit entrance, hands in his pockets, mouth pursed. He hummed, squinting at the quote I'd placed in vinyl above the display. "We were not passive, we were precise. Coretta Scott King." "Bold choice," he said. "Let's hope the donors understand what you were going for." What I was going for. As if he forgot who designed it. As if I didn't peel through courthouse records and dig through microfilm just to bring their voices here. He turned to the crowd. "Reminds me of the time I marched with Dr. King, actually. Funny. In his biography, that line gets longer every year." A young girl, no more than 15, came through the side entrance holding her grandmother's hand. A black family. The only ones here besides me and the older security guard posted near the restrooms. The girl stared up at the photographs, then at me. "Did you make this?" she whispered. "I did." Her eyes got big. "Like, all of it?" I nodded. "All of it." "Thank you," she said softly, like it meant more than she could fit into words. And that was the moment I knew I wasn't staying quiet for them. I was staying loud in silence. For her. Behind us, a bell chimed, microphones being tested. The crowd shifted toward the stage. Some donors leaned back in chairs, wine glasses swirling, some already half-buzzed, ready for their shout-outs and self-congratulations. And then the MC took the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's keynote was instrumental in designing the exhibit you see before you, drawing from first-hand family records, historic archives, and previously unreleased materials. It is our pleasure to introduce... I saw Clarence's brow furrow. The room turned to the stage. My name rang out. And I didn't move, not yet. I just stood there, still holding my tablet, still dressed like the help, watching their faces try to do the math. Wait, him? Wait, that boy? No, not a boy. Not your help, not your background noise. I set the tablet down, and I started walking. The carpet felt different when you're walking toward the stage. I'd crossed that floor before, to pick up stray napkins after hours, to quietly adjust lighting when they needed it brighter for photos, to swap out fragile artifacts without disturbing the donors' wine-stained conversations. But this time, I wasn't walking around them, I was walking through them, through, eyes locked on me like I'd stolen something, like I was trespassing in a place I'd built with my own hands. I heard whispers swell like a wave behind me. Wait, that's the guy from earlier. He was the one taking pictures, right? No way, that's the speaker. They said he was well-spoken. I stepped onto the stage, didn't rush, didn't smile. Just took my time adjusting the mic as the crowd settled into that special kind of silence, not respectful, not curious, but confused, nervous. That's when I finally looked at them, all of them. Some averted their eyes, some stared straight through me like if they blinked I'd vanish. And there, near the front, was the man who called me boy, with his hand still halfway raised, like maybe he'd asked me for a drink again. I leaned into the mic, cleared my throat, and said, "Boy, you better know your place." The room tensed like a pulled cord. I paused, let it breathe, then smiled, calm, controlled. "My place is here, and I think you all finally figured that out." Someone near the back gasped. I heard it, soft and sharp, like air being cut. And still, I didn't blink. "I know what some of y'all thought when you saw me tonight. I know because you told me, not with your words but with your hands, your eyes, your little smirks when I said I wasn't with catering." A soft ripple of movement, a few people crossing their legs, readjusting in their seats. One woman set her champagne down and folded her arms, waiting for me to mess up. I spent months researching this exhibit, reading the jailhouse letters of teenagers who faced dogs and fire hoses and still walked back into classrooms the next morning, interviewing elders who buried their trauma in folded quilts and hymnals, listening to the silences between their words, the places where pain sat too heavy to name. I looked toward the portraits again. They didn't fight for a seat at the table just to be tolerated at the table. They fought to build the damn table, and they knew what I know now. That power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just shows up, in a pressed blazer, with a tablet in his hand, and waits. Now people were really listening, not just hearing, listening. Some of them leaned forward. Some were still, and a few, a very few, nodded just slightly like a clock finally striking the right hour. I locked eyes with Clarence. His mouth was tight, hands folded in his lap. The picture of tight-lipped damage control. Good. I wasn't done yet. Y'all came here to honor history, but honoring something means more than drinking beneath its shadow. It means recognizing when history's standing in front of you, alive, breathing, and still being asked to prove he belongs. The air had shifted. Not the temperature, the energy. You could feel it. Thick, humming, uneasy. Like the room itself wasn't sure what to do with the truth now hanging in it like smoke. A few donors chuckled nervously, hoping I'd pivot to a lighter anecdote. A joke. Some story about how I overcame adversity, just to make them feel generous. But I stayed right there, standing in the fire, letting them see the whole blaze. I was 10 years old when my great-aunt first told me about her brother, my great-uncle, who disappeared in 1964 for registering folks to vote in Mississippi. They found his car in a bayou, door open, Bible on the seat. They never found him. I paused, scanned the front row. His name never made it into your textbooks. He's not in the documentaries, but his handwriting, his journal entries, his church rosters, his outreach plans, they're here, in this exhibit. In that glass case over there, you passed on the way to the bar. No one spoke. One woman looked down at her heels. Another shifted uncomfortably in her chair, suddenly interested in her napkin. And maybe if some of y'all had looked at me a little longer tonight, if you'd actually read the name on my badge instead of deciding who I was for me, you'd have recognized his last name. I let that sink in. The silence clapped louder than applause ever could. My name is DeShawn Elijah Brooks, and I carry my family in my mouth, in my back, in my work, in my very presence here tonight. Clarence looked ready to burst. He leaned over to whisper something to the director, probably damage control, probably some planned statement, but she didn't respond. Her face was pale, hands tight around the stem of her glass. And then I did what he feared most. I lifted the tablet, tapped the screen. A spotlight behind me dimmed, and the projection screen illuminated with the first slide. A photograph, grainy, sepia-toned. A group of protesters standing in front of a diner, arms linked. Third from the left, a teenage boy with soft eyes and dark skin. He looked tired, brave, human. That, I said, is Elijah Brooks, my great-uncle. Beaten unconscious 4 hours after this picture was taken. The screen shifted again, this time to my own photo. Me, cataloguing the very same image in our archive room. And this, I nodded. That's the same boy's bloodline still fighting to be seen. A few people started clapping. Not many, but enough. It wasn't performative. It was heavy, real. The kind of applause that came from people realizing they hadn't just ignored a person. They'd ignored a witness. I lowered the tablet, looked out across the crowd. I don't want your pity, I said. I want you to understand that history doesn't just live behind glass, it breathes. It walks among you. And sometimes it wears a name tag you didn't bother to read. The applause grew louder. Not roaring, not that performative ovation folks do when they're trying to save face. This was different. Measured, hesitant, like it had to fight its way through generations of silence before reaching their hands. I stepped back from the mic. Some faces stayed stony, unmoved, lips thin with discomfort, but others, especially the younger ones near the back, had tears welling up. Real ones. The kind that come when someone names something you've carried your whole life but never had the words for. I saw the girl again, the one who thanked me earlier. She was still holding her grandmother's hand, both of them standing now, not clapping, just looking at me like they saw a door open that had never been cracked before. I nodded to her. She nodded back. That was the only praise I needed. After the speech, I didn't stay on stage. I didn't want the spotlight to linger too long, not because I was afraid, but because I knew the power wasn't in the mic. It was in the moment, in what it shook loose. I stepped down, walked past Clarence, still seated, face stiff, knuckles white around his program. He didn't say a word, didn't offer a handshake, just stared straight ahead, like maybe if he looked long enough, he could undo the night. I walked past the man in the grey suit too, the one who called me boy. He opened his mouth as I passed. Hey, I didn't... I stopped, turned just enough to meet his eyes. No, I said, calm, steady. You didn't. And I left it there. No lecture, no grace that hadn't been earned. Just the weight of truth dropped gently into his lap. Later that night, while the last of the guests trickled out and the jazz quartet packed up their instruments, Diane, the museum director, found me in the hallway near the exhibit. You know they're going to talk about this for a long time, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Good, I replied. She looked like she wanted to say more, maybe something safe, neutral. She settled on, you did a brave thing. I didn't smile, just looked around at the walls, at the photographs, at the stories we preserved. Wasn't brave, I said. Just overdue. And for once, she didn't argue. By the next morning, my inbox was full. Some messages were polite and shaky, the kind of awkward reach-outs from folks trying to say the right thing without naming what they'd done wrong. Powerful speech last night. Didn't realize you were so articulate. Hope we didn't offend you. Things were just so busy. I didn't reply. Some doors don't need reopening. Some lessons need time to steep in silence, but one message caught my eye. Not from a donor, not from a board member. It was from a janitor. Marcus, mid-60s, works nights. We'd shared vending machine sandwiches and historical sidebars in the break room more nights than I could count. He'd once brought me a book of old protest songs and said, "History's got a beat if you listen close enough." His message was short. "Lil man, I saw you, made us all stand taller, thank you." That meant everything. 3 weeks later, the exhibit was extended. The museum said it was due to overwhelming community interest. What they didn't say was that most of that interest came from black families, teachers, and students, the same ones the board had quietly stopped inviting years ago. Kids started coming in droves. Teachers emailed me asking for group tours. Local elders dropped off shoeboxes of family keepsakes they'd kept under beds and in attics, asking if I could help preserve them too. One woman showed up with a worn Bible. Inside were scribbled sermon notes and one shaky signature that matched a name in our archives. "He was my father," she said. "Y'all finally brought him home." I cried after she left, because that's what this was really about. Not me, not a speech, not embarrassing rich folks into clapping. It was about calling the ghosts by name, about making sure the forgotten never stayed buried. Clarence eventually stepped down from the board, cited health reasons, though we all knew better. The new chair? A retired black history professor who told me over coffee that she'd been waiting 30 years for someone to shake that room. And the girl, the one from that night, wrote me a letter, in perfect cursive. "Mr. Brooks, I want to be a historian too. I didn't know we could do that until I saw you." I pinned it to my office corkboard, right above my great-uncle's photo. He's still looking forward in that picture, lips pressed, eyes alert. And now so am I. Some stories make the paper, others make it into people. A few days after the gala, I was invited to speak at a nearby high school. A mostly black student body, crammed into a gym with bad acoustics and folding chairs that creaked when you shifted your weight. They didn't want a lecture. They wanted proof. Not the kind you print on glossy posters or put behind glass. The kind that breathes. The kind that walks in and says, "Yeah, I see you, and I know what it feels like to be seen last, or not at all." I opened with the same line I used at the museum. "Boy, you better know your place." But this time it landed different. They laughed, shouted. A few stood up before I even explained the story. They'd heard it, not the gala version, but the real one, passed from student to student like a spark. And when I told them my place was right there, standing in front of them, I meant it. After the talk, a teacher pulled me aside. She was crying and trying not to show it. "You just gave them something they don't get a lot around here," she said. "Permission?" I asked. She nodded. "To dream loud." Back at the museum, they offered me a full-time position. Head of Cultural Engagement and Education. A shiny title they hadn't offered anyone before. I said no. Not because I was bitter, because I had somewhere else to be. Space across town had opened up. An old bank building with dusty marble floors and bulletproof teller windows no one used anymore. I bought it with grant money I never thought I'd get. I called it the Brooks Center, part archive, part classroom, part sanctuary. We don't serve wine, we serve memory, we serve community, we serve truth. Kids come after school. Elders come on Saturdays. We digitize their letters, we record their voices, we hold open mic nights and story circles where nobody has to be on to be heard. No velvet ropes, no curated experience. Just history, loud, unfiltered, and still becoming. And sometimes when I lock up late and the street's gone quiet, I pass the old Gala flyers still stuck to light poles downtown. I see my name in the fine print. Funny, they used to print it small, now it's on the sign out front, in bronze, right beneath my great-uncle's. The first time I held the key to the Brooks Center, my hand shook. Not from fear, from the weight of it. Metal, cool and simple. But it felt like more. Like the final piece of a puzzle my family had been building long before I ever took a breath. I walked through the doors at sunrise, the stained glass windows catching soft light like a whisper. The old bank vault was now an oral history studio. The teller booths, reading corners. We kept the marble floors, scuffed and scratched and proud, because we wanted folks to know this place had lived, and now it lived for us. On opening day, crowds formed around the block. Teachers, uncles, students, nurses. Some brought baby strollers, some brought Bibles. Some just came to sit, to breathe in a space where they didn't have to code switch or shrink or prove anything. There was no ribbon, just a door, unlocked. And I stood in it. I opened with the same phrase one last time, not to shame, not to sting, but to reclaim. Boy, you better know your place. I let the words settle in the room like dust catching sun. Well, I do now. I gestured to the crowd, to the archives, to the stories lining the walls, paper thin and iron strong. And it's here, where we are not background, not footnotes, not firsts or onlys. We are foundation. We are the original text. We are history in motion, and we are still writing. A roar of claps, laughter, tears, amen. And somewhere in the crowd, that same little girl from the Gala stood with her notebook held high. Same bright eyes, same awe. Except this time she wasn't whispering her thank you. She shouted it, loud, proud, heard. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And in that moment I didn't just feel seen, I felt rooted. Because when they tried to make me small, when they tried to rename me, reframe me, erase me, I didn't just take the mic, I built a stage for all of us.